Right? Okay. Good morning, children. Today, let us will see the first chapter, French Revolution and Ideas of Nation State. So, before going to start this first chapter, just want to recall the previous class lesson. So, in previous class, we discussed about the nationalism concept. We discussed about the Frederick Soros' vision of the world and how he was visualized his dream of the world, which was made up with the democratic and social republic. And also we discussed about the 19th century. So early 19th century, how did the European society was changed by the nationalism, and also we discussed about the nation state and modern state. Okay, so yesterday just we heard about the nation state concept. Now let us will discuss about the nation state. How did the nation state was emerged in France, and later how it was spreaded all over the Europe continent. Okay, now let us begin. The first clear expression of the nationalism. The first clear expression of the nationalism came with the French Revolution in the year 1789. This is the most important question. So first clear expression of the nationalism came with the French Revolution. This is the most important, you have to remember. Okay, in which year? 1789. So France. Okay, as would you remember, France, it was a full-fledged territorial state in the year 1789. Okay, it was a full-fledged territorial state in the year 1789 under the rule of the absolute monarch. Okay, who was the absolute monarch during the 1789? The Louis XVI. He was the ruler. He had control over the entire France under his rule in the year 1789. Okay, 1789. See, in France, the constitutional and political changes, okay, constitutional and political changes came in the wake up of the French Revolution in the year 1789. Okay, constitutional changes were also occurred and political changes were also occurred in the wake up of the French Revolution, when it was woke up in the year 1789. In that year only, all the political changes were started in France and the constitutional changes were started in the France. If you want further information, means just want to recall the previous year's first lesson, then you will understand the entire concept of the constitutional changes and political changes, how it was changed the entire France country. Okay, France country. See, the political changes and constitutional changes came in the wake up of the French Revolution. Okay, in the wake up of the French Revolution, and the revolutionaries were transformed the sovereignty from the monarch to the citizen of the France. Okay, citizen of the France after the French Revolution. Okay, French Revolution, just the revolutionary peoples were transformed the sovereignty from the monarch. Okay, from the monarch. So they established the constitutional government from the monarch to the citizens of the France after the 1789. Okay, after the 1789. And these French revolutionaries, okay, the French revolutionaries officially announced that the people of the France, okay, the people of the France, they henceforth they constitute the nation and shape of the nation, or the shape of the nation after the French Revolution. I think you hope understand about the clear expression of the nationalism. Okay, so here are some important points you have to note down. So first, the clear expression of the nationalism came with the French Revolution in the year 1789, and during the 1789, the France was ruled by the absolute monarch, who the Louis XVI. Later, constitutional and political changes came in the wake up of the France Revolution, and the French revolutionaries were transformed the sovereignty from the monarch to the citizen of the France country. These important points you have to remember and write down in your notebook. Right. So now let us come to the point. This is the most important, because So how did the nation concept were arise in the France Revolution, or else we call the French Revolution? So how did the French revolutionaries were introduced the nation state? Okay, nation state from very beginning of the French Revolution. Okay, from very beginning of the French Revolution, the revolutionaries were introduced various measures and practices that could create the sense of common identity among us the French people in the year 1789. Okay, so what happened in the beginning? In the early revolution or the beginning of the revolution, the revolutionaries were introduced to various measures and practices that could create the sense of common identity among the European people. So what steps they were taken to identify or taken to create the sense of common identity among the French peoples during the 1789? 1789, let us will start or let us will discuss one by one. So the first step was taken by the French revolutionaries was La Patrie and La Citoyenne. Okay, La Patrie means fatherland, La Citoyenne means the citizen. These two important ideas were emphasized the notion of the united community. Okay, united community. They were enjoying equal rights under the constitution. Okay, under the constitution, this was the most important step was taken by the French revolutionaries during this time. Okay, during this time. So what was that? The La Patrie was introduced and law citizens were introduced. These two concepts, fatherland and the citizens. Okay, fatherland and citizens. So these two ideas were emphasized. A notion of the united community enjoyed the equal rights under the constitution. Under the constitutions. Before it was not there because the entire country was under the control of Louis XVI. He had a control over the all citizens in the France during the early 19th century and during the 18th century. Okay, I think you got first step. Okay, the first step was the fatherland concept and the citizens concept was arised among us the France peoples by the French revolutionaries. Okay, and second step, this was the most important step was taken by the French revolutionaries to create the sense of common identity among us the French people, which was that the new flag introduced. Okay, new flag introduced. After the French Revolution, the revolutionary peoples were introduced the new flag for the country. They introduced the tricolor flag. Okay, tricolor flag, which was unite the entire France peoples in a one nation. In a one nation. The new flag was introduced instead of the royal flag. Okay, royal flag. Royal flag means who was used this flag under the monarchy system. Okay, under the monarchy system. This was also used or this was also helped to create the sense of common identity among the French people during the French Revolution. Okay, and so next step was the formation of National Assembly. This is most important. National Assembly. Okay, so how we are calling in India Parliament. So this is the Parliament of the France, the National Assembly. The formation of the National Assembly. So how did the National Assembly was formed in France? See, after the French revolutionaries, the revolutionaries were formed the National Assembly. I think you might have known about the French society. So how did the French society have divided into four estates? First estate, second estate, third estate and fourth estate. Right? See, first estate, second estate and third estate peoples, they were enjoying some privileges by the birth, but fourth estate, the fourth estate belongs to the peasants, but they were servant of that three estate. So after the French Revolution, what would happen in the France? See, the estate general, okay, the estate general now electing by the active citizen of the France. And here one question is there. So who were the active citizens? Okay, so in France, I think you know about that. Only the active citizens had rights to vote in the France country. So who above the 25 age and who were the owners of the lands, they had a right to hold to elect their representatives to the estate. But now what happened? The estate general was electing by the active citizens. Okay, active citizens, and later this general estate was renamed as a National Assembly. Okay, National Assembly. Before formation of the National Assembly, it was called as a General Estate. Okay, General Estate. When the representatives were electing by the active citizens, later the revolutionaries were renamed the General Estate as a National Assembly. Okay, National Assembly. And next step was the hymns were composed. Okay, the hymns were composed in France country and oaths were taken in the name of the country. Okay, in the name of the country. So now you can see this process in democracy countries. So the elected representatives are taking oaths in the name of the nation, and some MPs and MLAs, they are taking oaths in the name of the gods, and so and so, right? And see, this is most important now. The centralized administrative system was put in a place. Okay, the centralized administration system was put in a place, and they formulated the uniform laws for the all citizens of the France peoples within a territory. Okay, within a territory. See, the formulated the uniform laws. They introduced the uniform laws to the all citizens of the France. Okay, now we are calling no all are equal before the laws. This concept was given by the French revolutionaries during the 18th century. Okay, the centralized administration system was put in a place. Okay, put in a place. What was the centralized administration system? The entire nation divided into several parts for the administrative purposes. For example, now you take India, central government, state government, and the district governments. So like that, the centralized administration system was put in a place in France, and they formulated the uniform laws for the citizen of the France people. Okay, France people. So now what happened? All peoples are equal before the laws. Okay, no one above the laws or no one below the laws in the France people. Okay, in the France people. And later see, the internal custom duties and dues were abolished. Okay, so this was the major issues in the France before the 19th century. The internal customs duties and dues were abolished. So this was varied from one place to another place in a France country. See, the custom duties. Okay, custom duties. So now we are calling no taxation system. This was varies from one place to another place in a France. That was abolished by the France revolutionaries peoples, and they were introduced the equal weight and measure to the entire France peoples after the French Revolution. And regional dialects were discouraged. Okay, regional dialects were discouraged in France, and the all Germany peoples were started to speak the French language. Later, the French became the common language of the country. Okay, common language of the country. So these all steps were taken by the revolutionaries to create the what? The sense of common identity. Okay, common identity. Hope you understand about this concept. So how did the revolutionaries were created the sense of common identity amongst the France people? Okay, France people. Just in previous class I explained about the nation state. What was the nation state? See, I explained about the features of the nation state. No, the sense of common identity. Identity, we are France people, and common history. Okay, common history, struggle. This all would help to the France peoples to start the French Revolution. Okay, French Revolution. These important steps you have to remember. Okay, who were introduced these all important steps, or who was introduced the various measures and practices to create the sense of common identity amongst the French people? These revolutionaries were taken these all important steps. Okay, so next one you see, later the revolutionaries further they declared that after this the revolutionaries were further declared that the mission, okay, and the destiny of the France nation, this is the most important. Later, the French revolutionaries were declared that the destiny and mission of the France nation to liberate the France peoples from the despotism. Okay, despotism. Right. So the France peoples further what they were declared? They were declared that the mission and destiny of the France country to liberate the all people from the despotism of the country. Okay, in other words, they helped the other peoples to start or establish the nation state in the European continent. Okay, European continent. And later see the spread of nationalism. Okay, spread of nationalism. So how did the nationalism was spreaded across the Europe continent? Okay, Europe continent. Activities in the French Revolution. These all activities, no? The activities or activities within the French Revolution would head the different cities in the France. Okay, the nationalism was spreaded in the different cities in France. Okay, different cities in France. For example, when it was spreaded in the different cities in the Europe continent, all the students and the middle class peoples were started the Jacobean clubs. They were formed the Jacobean club. So you know about the Jacobean club. Jacobean club was a political association during the 18th and 19th century, which was emerged in especially in France, and later it was spreaded in the different cities in Europe continent. So when the students and the middle class peoples were started to form the Jacobean club, so there they were started campaigning for the French military. Okay, they were campaigning, they were organized meeting, they were organized public rallies for the French military to move into the different cities in the France. So where it was moved, you know, first the French military moved into the Holland. Okay, Holland. See, next Italy, Hungary, and different cities in the early 1790s. Okay, 1790s, the French military was entered into the different cities in the European continent. For example, first time the French military moved into the Holland. Later it was moved into the Italy and some different cities in the France and the neighbor countries of the France. It was slowly, the nationalism was spreaded through the French military in different cities of the France. So this military was led by the great Napoleon. So, Police Code or Civil Code of 1804. This is the most important question for your board examination. So they may ask, what is the another name of the Napoleon Code? Civil Code, right? So they may ask on Civil Code or Napoleon Code. Both are same, you have to remember. Okay, so see, when the revolutionaries government of France became weak and the unpopular in France, okay, unpopular in France. So when the before Napoleon came to the power, the France was ruled by the revolutionary government. That revolutionary government was becoming weak. So already you might know about that government in the last year. So that direct rule was ruled the France, and how the problems, crises were arised between the directors, and how that government was becoming weak, and later how that government was unpopular among the France peoples. Already we might have studied in the last 3 years. So now also you see the revolutionaries government became weak in France, and that government was unpopular among the France peoples. That situation was used by the Napoleon to become a monarch of the France country in the year 1804. Okay, 1804. That situation was used by the who? Napoleon. That was given the path to the Napoleon to become a monarch of the France in the year 1804. See, he remained France emperor from 18th May 1804 to 6th April 1814. This is most important. From which year to which year the Napoleon had been ruled the France? From 1804 to 1814. Okay, 1814. And the Napoleon ruled France as a Napoleon first and brought monarch back to the France. So on the name of the Napoleon first, the Napoleon had been ruled the France, and he brought the monarchy system back in France in the year 1804, right? 1804. So now later what happened? See, what is the Napoleonic Code or Civil Code? So when he became a monarch of the country, so how he was introduced the Napoleonic Code and how it was influenced on the French peoples, and what was the benefits of the civil codes to the European peoples, especially for the French peoples. Now we'll see one by one. See now, what is the Napoleonic Code or the Civil Code of 1804? The Napoleon, okay, who was the large emperor and who ruled the large empire, and this was, see, introduced the many reforms. So when he became a monarch of the France country, he had expanded the France countries. That time what happened? He introduced so many reforms, that so many reforms were known as famously the Civil Code of 1804 or the Napoleonic Code, right? Napoleonic Code of 1804. Now we'll discuss which were the important reforms were done by the Napoleon. So first one, you see, the destroyed democracy but made the administrative field more national and efficient. So usually you know that. So when he had become a king of the France, usually he destroyed the democracy, but the peoples were accepted the Napoleon because he made a abundant changes in the administration field. Okay, administration field more national and efficient. Okay, more national and efficient. So because of his reforms, the peoples were welcomed the Napoleon in the country. Okay, Napoleon in the country. So now we will see which were the important reforms were done by the Napoleon. So first one, see, abolished the privileges based on the birth, established all are equal before the law. This is the most important reforms by the Napoleon. Abolished the privilege based on the birth. I think you might have known about that. So first estate, second estate, and some peoples were got privileges by the birth in the France. So that privileges abolished by the Napoleon in his civil code, right? And he introduced the all are equal before the laws. So once you imagine how he was introduced abundant changes and revolutionary reforms in the society, okay, so which were brought by the monarchy system, and who had been ruled the country, they imposed these all rules on the France peoples, but the Napoleon abolished all the what you call that rules on the France people. For example, he abolished the privileges based on the birth, and he established all are equal before the law. Now you see, feudal system, serfdom and manorial dues were abolished. So you know about the feudal system and serfdom. Okay, feudal system and serfdom. So the kings had given lands to the landlords. Instead of that, the landlords, they were supplying military to the kings, and serfdoms, the free labors, these all were abolished by the Napoleon. So next, see, the guilt restrictions were removed. Okay, the guilt restrictions were removed by the Napoleon, so which was given help to the all business persons. So the middle class people, especially the business persons, had given support to the Napoleon because he removed the guilt restrictions, and he improved the transport system and communication. He improved the transport and communication system, which was the base on the trade. You know about that. When which countries are developing the transport and the communication, 100% that countries will become a developed country. So this was already introduced by the Napoleon in the 18th century. Okay, 18th century. Just you think about the Napoleon, how he had reformed the entire France country, and how he had developed the France as the most powerful country in the Europe continent. See next, standardized weight and measures were introduced. So standardized and weight were introduced, or implemented in the France country, because now only we discussed so how the measures were differs from Frankfurt to other countries, Frankfurt cities to countries and other markets, that all were reintroduced by the Napoleon. And uniform laws and the common national currency, so introduced the uniform laws for the all peoples, and he introduced the common currency for the all peoples in the France. Before it was not there, it was differs, or it was vary from one place to another place, right? So when he was introduced the common currency for all, which was made the all France peoples in a unity, right? See next to the French army were welcomed as a harbinger of the liberty. So when the Napoleon was introduced these all reforms, the other European peoples were introduced the French army as a harbinger of the liberty, harbinger of the liberty. So where here Holland, Switzerland and some cities like Brussels, Milan and Warsaw. So there they were hostile the French army. Why they were hate, or why they were neglect, or why they were not given support to the French military? Because of his administration system. See, the administrative arrangement does not go to hand to hand in the political freedom. So this administration system did not go to the hand to hand in the political freedom. So this was not welcomed by some European countries like Holland, Switzerland and some cities like Brussels, Milan and Warsaw. So why they were not welcomed the Napoleon? Because of this reason. So one, they increased the taxation, second censorship, and forced censorship into the French armies. So because of these policies, some countries were not welcomed by the Napoleon. So the increased taxation. Why the Napoleon had increased the taxes? To fulfill the military needs and to develop the country. And censorship, so inside the country and neighbor of the countries, they were giving message to the other peoples against the Napoleon. To control that movement, he introduced the censorship and forced censorship into the French army. Even in French army, some peoples were not welcome the Napoleon, right? Napoleon. So this was the Napoleonic Code. So hope you understand about the Civil Code or Napoleonic Code of 1804.